A police officer picked up the phone to fire a janitor, but what he heard instead froze him in place. Two tiny voices, taking turns, whispered through the static, "Mom's really sick, but we can clean if you need." In that moment, the weight of years' loss, silence, routine fractured, and as his German Shepherd pressed gently against his leg, Officer Declan Granger realized he wasn't just hearing two child's offer. He was hearing a cry for help that would rewrite the rest of his life. The morning light filtered through the tall, frosted windows of the Asheville Police Department like a memory trying to break through glass. Officer Declan Granger sat at his desk on the third floor, back straight, uniform immaculate, coffee untouched. The office was quiet as always. Declan liked it that way. He kept his space as he kept his life, orderly, silent, untouched by the messiness of emotion. On his desk, papers were stacked in clean, squared corners. A single photo frame faced away from the world, the image inside too personal to share, too painful to look at. It was the last picture he ever took with Rebecca. Her smile had always outshone his shadows, until the shadows won. It had been 7 years since she passed. 1 year married, then cancer stole her before they could even think about children. Since then, Declan had built a life around control. He transferred from Milwaukee after a decade in narcotics, choosing Asheville for its slower rhythm, its distance from everything that used to make him feel alive and everything that could break him. He requested administrative duty paperwork, oversight, internal reviews. No patrol, no risk, no loss. The only exception to that rule now lay curled beneath his desk. Valor, his German Shepherd 10 years old, black and tan with intelligent amber eyes, was once a canine legend, known for precision and nerve. Now retired, Valor moved a little slower, a little stiffer in the hips, but his devotion had never dimmed. He was Declan's last partner, his only family, and the one presence he allowed to break the silence of his routine. Declan glanced down at the attendance report forwarded from Human Resources. One red line caught his eye. Marla Jennings, unexcused absence, 2 days. He clicked his pen and circled the name. She was part-time janitorial staff, assigned to clean the third-floor west wing, the administrative corridor. He couldn't recall ever speaking to her directly. Her file listed her as punctual, quiet, with no prior infractions. Still, he couldn't let it slide. Attendance discipline, like everything else, required consistency. He clicked the intercom. "Trina, do we have a contact number for Marla Jennings?" His assistant's voice replied a second later. "Yes, sir. I'll forward it to your screen now." Declan nodded once and reached for the receiver. Beside him, Valor stirred, lifting his head and giving a soft grunt. Declan paused, glancing at the dog. "Something wrong, boy?" he murmured. Valor didn't answer, of course, but his gaze fixed on Declan's hand, and his ears angled forward with a tension Declan hadn't seen in years, not since Milwaukee. It was enough to make him hesitate, just for a second. Then he dialed. The line rang. Once, twice, 4 times. He was preparing the firm, impersonal script he always used when reprimanding absentee staff. Then the line clicked. A breath, a rustle. "Hello?" The voice was tiny, high, tentative, a child's whisper through static. Declan's brow furrowed. "This is Officer Granger, Asheville Police Department. I'm calling for Marla Jennings." There was a pause, then a second voice. Nearly identical in pitch, but quicker, a little brighter. "Mommy's sick," the second girl said. "She can't talk," the first one added, softer. "Real sick," the second whispered again. "But we can clean. If you need," Declan didn't speak. For a long, stunned moment, he couldn't. The silence on the other end felt almost sacred fragile, like something he could shatter if he breathed too loud. He looked down. Valor had stood up completely now, pressing against Declan's leg, eyes locked on his face. His ears were drawn back, not in fear, but in something close to empathy. Declan swallowed, his throat dry. "Who am I speaking to?" "I'm Lily Ray," said the first voice. "I'm Maisie Rose," said the second. "We're 6. "Are you alone right now?" Another pause. "Mommy's in bed," Lily Ray said. "She's not moving a lot," Maisie Rose added quickly. She said she just needs a few more days, but she hasn't eaten. Declan reached for a pen without looking, jotting notes blindly across the margin of Marla's file. Has anyone come by to check on her? No, came the near unison reply. Maisie Rose added, We've been real quiet. She doesn't like when we wake her. Valor gave another soft whine. Declan closed his eyes. For years, he'd trained himself to detach, to treat every situation like a line in a report. But this wasn't a report. This was a home with two little girls waiting for toast to pop and hoping their mother would get up on her own. Listen, girl, he said, voice softer now. You don't need to clean anything. I just needed to check in. Can I talk to your mom for a second? Even just to hear her voice? Silence, then Lily Ray whispered. She's sleeping with her eyes open, I think. That tore something loose in his chest. I'll come by, he said before he could think. I just want to make sure everyone's okay. You won't be mad, Maisie asked. Number, I promise. There was a long pause, then a soft click. The line went dead. Declan sat frozen, hands still on the receiver. The clock on the wall ticked in the background. A file slid from the edge of his desk to the floor, but he didn't pick it up. He just stared at the phone like it had whispered the ghost of a life he might have had. Valor nudged his leg again. Declan stood, pulled on his jacket, clipped his badge to his belt. His hands moved automatically like muscle memory from the days when instinct mattered more than policy. As he stepped out into the hallway, he said nothing. Neither did Valor. They just walked one man and one dog down the polished corridor, past sterile nameplates and closed doors, towards something far messier, far more human, waiting just a few miles away. The hallway smelled faintly of stale coffee and laundry soap, the kind sold in dollar stores and poured into reused containers. Declan Granger walked slowly, Valor at his side, the dog's nails clicking against the linoleum. The walls of the apartment building were scuffed and poorly patched, numbers on the doors faded or missing altogether. He had to stop twice to match them with his notepad. When he finally reached apartment 3C, the door looked like it hadn't been painted in years, brown, worn, slightly warped from weather. Declan stood still for a long moment, listening. Nothing. Then a shuffle of small feet inside, a soft voice behind the wood. Is that him? I think so, another whispered. He knocked once, gentle, controlled. The door opened just enough for two wide sets of eyes to peek out. Matching blonde curls fell past their shoulders, and both wore pale pink dresses that looked a size too big. Probably hand-me-downs, the fabric a little frayed at the edges. One girl held the doorknob tightly, her knuckles pale. The other tilted her head, curious but cautious. Hi, Declan said, his voice low, reassuring. I'm Officer Granger. We spoke on the phone. The girls looked at each other. The bolder one nodded, then opened the door wider. I'm Maisie Rose, she said. This is Lily Ray. We remember. Lily Ray stepped back, nearly disappearing behind her sister. Declan saw how she clutched a small fabric bunny, one ear nearly torn off, her thumb hovering near her mouth before she remembered not to use it. Valor moved forward slowly, stopping just short of the threshold. The girls stared. What's his name? Maisie asked. Valor, Declan replied. Is he nice? Lily asked, barely audible. He's the best, Declan said. He listens more than most people. That seemed to be enough. Maisie opened the door fully, and Valor stepped in first. His gait relaxed, tail low but wagging gently. Declan followed, instinctively removing his cap as he crossed the threshold. The apartment was smaller than he expected, and colder. A single floor lamp near the couch lit the space. The kitchen was neat to neat. Dishes stacked precisely, dry but not put away. Two chairs sat by a table with no food, only crayons and a sheet of paper with two half-drawn flowers. The air smelled faintly of menthol and something sour, like old tea left in a mug too long. She's in there, Maisie whispered, pointing to a curtained room in the back. Mommy said not to let anyone in unless it was important. Are you important? Declan looked at her, the seriousness in her eyes, and said quietly, I don't know, but I hope I am now. Maisie nodded like that made sense. He turned to Lily Ray. Would you mind if Valor went in with me? She blinked, then looked at the dog. Only if he promises to be gentle. Valor tilted his head, then sat obediently. Declan smiled. That's a yes. The room at the end of the hall had no door, just a beige curtain that didn't quite reach the floor. Declan stepped through, Valor close behind. The room was dim. A twin bed sat beneath a window, covered in plastic, taped against the cold. On the bed, Marla Jennings lay propped up with two thin pillows. Her hair, once auburn by the photo in her file, was dull and tangled. Her cheeks were sunken, and her skin carried a grayness that no makeup could hide. Still, when she saw him, her eyes widened with alarm, then embarrassment. "Mr. Granger?" she rasped. "Declan's fine," he said, standing at the foot of the bed. "I came to check in. The girls said you were sick." Marla tried to sit up, but gave up halfway through. Valor walked quietly to the side of the bed and lay down, head resting on his paws, eyes locked on her with a calm patience. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," she said, her voice rough. "I thought if I stayed quiet, no one would notice." "Well," Declan said gently, "someone noticed." Marla gave a dry, hollow laugh, which ended in a cough. "They're good girls. I didn't want them to worry. They already see too much." Declan didn't answer right away. He looked around the room, neatly folded laundry at the foot of the bed, medicine bottles lined up on the nightstand, a crumpled letter from the landlord partially tucked beneath a magazine. "I wasn't going to come," he admitted. "I almost made the call and moved on." Marla's eyes dropped. "Wouldn't blame you." "But then your girls offered to come clean in your place," Declan added. That made her look up. "They didn't. Oh, God. Maisie probably talked too much. Lily tries to keep her quiet, but—" "They weren't trying to get you in trouble," Declan interrupted. "They were trying to help you." Silence settled between them. "I had pneumonia last year," Marla said quietly. "Didn't slow me down. This flu, though, it knocked me flat. I thought I'd bounce back in 2 days. Then 3. I haven't been able to stand for a week. I was afraid if I called out, I'd lose the job." Declan sat in the small chair beside her bed, resting his forearms on his knees. "You didn't ask for help." "I didn't think anyone would care." Declan looked toward the curtain, where 2 sets of small eyes peeked around the edge. "They care." Marla followed his gaze. Her eyes shimmered. "I don't want them to grow up thinking no one ever shows up." "They won't," Declan said. "Not if I can help it." Marla closed her eyes. A single tear slid down the side of her cheek. Valor shifted closer, placing his head gently on the edge of the bed. Marla moved one hand toward him, trembling, and Valor didn't move a muscle. Declan stayed for a long while after that. He spoke little. The girls sat cross-legged on the floor with Valor, drawing pictures and occasionally glancing up to make sure he was still there. No one asked him to stay. No one told him to leave. So he didn't. Declan hadn't planned to go back the next day, or the day after, but by the 3rd morning, it no longer felt like a decision, it felt like routine. Except this time, routine didn't mean order or silence. It meant seeing 2 pink dresses flutter at the window when his car pulled up, hearing Valor's soft tail thump against the passenger seat, and feeling something he hadn't known he missed, being expected. He brought soup the first time. Just cans, stacked neatly in a grocery bag. The girls took turns carrying them to the counter. Then he came with cold medicine, toothpaste, and paper towels. Later it was puzzles, notebooks, a fresh set of watercolor paints that Maisie Rose squealed over like it was Christmas. Declan had no idea what little girls liked, but they didn't seem to notice. They liked him. Each visit blended into the next, but the small moments stayed with him. Like how Lily Ray always sat close to Valor, her hand resting gently on his back while she stared at the TV with the volume off. Or how Maisie Rose never stopped asking questions about his badge, about his car, about whether he'd ever eaten a bug during training. Maisie Rose, the more talkative twin, had a gap in her front teeth and an old scrape on her knee that never seemed to heal because she couldn't sit still. She was 6 going on 16, curious, animated, constantly seeking connection. Lily Ray, by contrast, was quiet and observant. She rarely spoke unless spoken to, but when she did, her words were careful, like she was choosing them from a smaller, older vocabulary. She often watched Maisie before reacting, as if letting her sister take the emotional lead was just easier. On Thursday afternoon, he found the apartment door cracked open. That alone made him tense, his training too deeply ingrained. But when he knocked and stepped inside, he saw both girls seated at the coffee table, hunched over a sheet of poster board. "Surprise!" Maisie called before he could even speak. She held up the poster. Across it, in bold purple crayon, were the words, "Welcome Officer, Declan and Valor." The letters wobbled, and the heart-shaped O's were clearly Maisie's idea. Valor trotted over immediately, his tail wagging in acknowledgement. "You guys made this?" Declan asked, taken aback. "Well," Maisie said, wiping her hands on her dress, "we wanted to make sure you knew this was your house, too. Like, kind of." Lily Ray added, "Only if you want." He didn't trust himself to speak right away. Instead, he crouched beside the table and ran a finger over the uneven letters. "I think it's the best welcome I've ever had," he finally said. Marla was stronger now, still pale, still prone to coughing fits, but she could sit upright for longer than 10 minutes and make it to the kitchen with help. Her eyes no longer held that hollow panic. She still apologized constantly, as if she believed the act of needing others was something to be ashamed of. That afternoon, while the girls drew with Valor half asleep at their feet, Marla and Declan sat on the small back porch. It barely fit 2 chairs and overlooked a weedy patch of cracked pavement that once posed as a courtyard. "I was 20 when I had them," Marla said, watching the branches sway. "Too young, too scared. Their father left 2 weeks after I found out I was pregnant. No warning, just gone." Declan said nothing. "I worked nights as a nurse for a while. Couldn't afford childcare, so I slept when they did. Got by until the hospital cut my hours. Janitorial work was the only thing I could find that didn't care if I had degrees or history. Just show up and clean, that's it." "You did more than that," Declan said. Marla gave him a sideways look. "You don't have to say that." He turned to face her. "I know. I'm saying it anyway." Inside, Maisie was trying to teach Lily how to draw a unicorn, and Valor had fallen asleep with one paw resting over a pink crayon. Declan hadn't realized how deeply he'd settled into their lives until that moment. He thought he was just helping, dropping off medicine, bringing groceries, keeping them afloat. But it wasn't about tasks. It was about presence. That evening, as he prepared to leave, Maisie ran up to him, holding a piece of folded paper. "It's a picture of you," she announced proudly, "and Valor, and me and Lily and Mommy. We're in a park." Declan unfolded it slowly. The stick figures were crude, smiling wide, standing under a tree with pink scribbles for blossoms. A big dog sat in the middle. Declan's figure had a hat and what appeared to be a star. "You made me taller than the tree," he said, "'cause you're the biggest grown-up I know." Lily Ray came up beside him, shyly tugging at his sleeve. "You remind me of the dad in our bedtime story. The one who always comes back," Maisie added. "Only better. 'Cause you're real." Declan froze. It was like someone had whispered the name Rebecca into the room. For a moment, he couldn't find breath. He looked at the girls, at their trust, their open affection, and he didn't know whether to feel grateful or devastated. Marla stood in the kitchen doorway, watching. She didn't interrupt. She just gave him a small, knowing smile, the kind that said, "I see it too." That night, driving home, Declan didn't turn on the radio. Valor rested his chin on the back seat and occasionally nudged his shoulder. Declan gripped the wheel tightly because everything inside him felt loose, as if the walls he'd carefully built had begun to crack. He thought he was helping a family in need, but the truth was simpler and harder. They were helping him. It was early evening when Declan closed the car door outside the Jennings apartment, a quiet gray settling over the parking lot. He didn't check his phone, didn't glance at his watch. Time had become elastic around this place. Valor hopped out beside him with a soft grunt, stretching before trotting toward the familiar stairwell. Declan followed, holding a paper bag that crinkled with the weight of its contents. Fresh bread, soup, and a small coloring book with glitter on the cover. Maisie had asked once if glitter was too much for a police officer, and Declan had replied, "Deadpan? Only if it explodes." Inside, the girls had built a pillow fort. Declan found them giggling under an overturned laundry basket with blankets draped over it, stuffed animals guarding each corner. A crayon sign taped to the side read, "No boys allowed except Declan and Valor." Marla sat nearby on the couch, bundled in a worn cardigan, looking far more alert than she had days ago. She was still thin, but color had returned to her cheeks, and the dullness in her eyes had softened. "You're early," she said with a small smile. "I wasn't doing anything important," Declan replied, setting the bag down. "Figured Valor missed his girls." "Flattering," Marla murmured. "Being demoted to second place behind a dog." "I've seen his approval ratings," Declan said, deadpan. "They're higher than mine." Valor sniffed the pillow fort cautiously, then curled up beside it as if standing guard. Maisie peeked out to give him a conspiratorial wink. Lily Ray stayed half hidden, her head resting against a stuffed elephant that looked like it had survived 100 washes and at least one fire. Declan sat beside Marla without speaking. It had become their pattern. She didn't ask why he kept coming, and he didn't try to explain. The silence between them wasn't heavy. It was lived in, like old shoes that didn't pinch anymore. "You don't talk about yourself much," Marla said quietly after a while, glancing at him from the corner of her eye. Declan leaned forward, hands clasped between his knees. "Not much to talk about." "I doubt that," she said, tilting her head. "You're not the kind of man who ends up in a child's pillow fort by accident." He hesitated, then said, "I was married." Marla nodded slowly. "She got sick a year after our wedding. Stage 4. Nothing anyone could do." His voice was flat, factual. It was the only way he could say it without choking. "I thought we'd have kids, a house with too many shoes at the door. Instead, I got silence." "I'm sorry," she said and meant it. He gave a half shrug. "I transferred out here thinking less noise would hurt less. Turns out, less noise is just quieter." From beneath the blankets, Maisie's voice rang out. "We're building a castle." Declan called back, "Do I get a crown?" "Nope," Maisie declared. "You get a sword and Valor's the dragon." Valor let out a low sigh, unimpressed with his role. Marla smiled again, and it lingered. "They've changed since you came." "How so?" "They laugh more, sleep better, eat without being asked." Maisie's been singing again. She used to sing to Lily when they were scared. Her voice wavered for the first time. "I didn't know how much of me was missing until they started looking like kids again." Declan watched the flickering light from the kitchen, where the hallway bulb was dying. "Sometimes we don't realize we're drowning," he said softly, "until someone sits beside us and says, 'I see you.'" Later, as he gathered his things, the girls emerged from their fort, yawning. Maisie's curls were wild, her cheeks flushed. Lily Ray held Valor's ear gently, whispering something to him. Declan stood, jacket in hand. "You leaving?" Maisie asked, blinking slowly. He nodded. "It's late." Lily Ray stepped forward, small fingers wrapping around his wrist. "Will you come back tomorrow?" Declan knelt, eye level with them. "Every day." He didn't say it to reassure them. He said it because he meant it. For the first time in years, he meant something without hesitation. The sky outside had deepened into a quiet violet when Declan arrived at the Jennings apartment that evening. He hadn't said he'd come, but something in him knew they were expecting him anyway. Valor padded along beside him, steady as always, his paws clicking softly against the stairs. The old apartment building groaned under the weight of the night settling in, but the hallway outside 3C glowed faintly with a string of fairy lights taped around the doorframe. A Maisie Rose invention, no doubt. He knocked once, out of habit, and the door opened before his hand lowered. Lily Ray stood there, hair tucked behind her ears, her pink dress smoothed and wrinkle-free. Declan recognized the way she held herself, like she'd been standing there longer than she wanted to admit. She didn't say anything. She just stepped aside. Maisie Rose came skidding into the hallway socks first, nearly crashing into her sister. "You're late," she said, hands on hips. "Valor missed his appointment." Valor barked once, low and amused before trotting in. He moved straight to the corner where his water bowl had appeared 3 days ago. Declan had never brought it one day. It was just there. Stainless steel, clean, full. like someone had decided this was as much his home as anyone else's. Marla was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter in a worn but clean flannel shirt. Her hair was brushed, still damp from a recent shower. She looked tired, but the kind of tired that came after doing too much, not after weeks of doing nothing. There was life in her face again, and a quiet steadiness in her posture. She didn't look surprised to see him. "I found a can of beans in the back of the pantry," she said. "Turned it into dinner. Don't ask me how." Declan stepped into the small kitchen, hands in his jacket pockets. "If the girls are still standing, I'd say you did something right." Marla smirked. "They're eating something. That counts." He leaned against the wall watching her. There were still dishes in the sink and a pile of unfolded laundry on the chair by the window. But for the first time, the apartment didn't feel like it was holding its breath. It felt lived in. It felt like a place that had made peace with itself. "You didn't have to come tonight," she said after a while, not meeting his eyes. "I didn't," he replied. "I wanted to." That silenced the room. Even the girls, still chattering in the living room, seemed to pause. Valor wandered out, tail swaying, and settled between the twins like a sentinel. Marla looked up slowly, something cautious in her gaze. "Why?" she asked, not with doubt, but with quiet fear. Declan pushed away from the wall, moving closer, not so much with intention as with gravity. "Because this isn't just helping anymore. It's not a favor, or an obligation." Marla's eyes welled, but she didn't blink. "Then what is it?" He hesitated for the first time, not because he didn't know, but because saying it out loud made it real. "It's home," he said. The word hung there, unfamiliar but not unwelcome. He took a slow breath. "I didn't expect to care this much. I didn't come here to start over. I just wanted to make sure a couple kids weren't left to fend for themselves. But somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing myself as the guy who just shows up with groceries." He glanced toward the girls who were now trying to braid Valor's tail. "I don't want to just visit anymore." Marla's lip trembled, and she bit it hard. "Declan, you don't have to say anything now," he said gently. "I just needed you to know that if this," he gestured lightly around the room, "is something you want me to be part of, I would be honored." There was no dramatic swell of music, no cinematic kiss, just a pause, a long human silence where two people stood in a kitchen with their scars and regrets laid bare, and found something resembling hope between the crumbs and coffee mugs. Marla finally moved slowly, carefully, and stepped forward. She reached for his hand, tentative but firm. "We're not perfect," she said. "We don't have much, but we have room." He nodded once, voice thick. "That's all I've ever needed." The moment was broken by a small tug at his pant leg. Lily Ray, quiet and deliberate, looked up at him. "Does this mean," she asked softly, "you're our family now?" Declan dropped to one knee, suddenly overwhelmed by the weight of the question. Maisie crept closer, eyes wide. He looked between them, these two fragile yet fiercely brave little girls in their matching pink dresses, and he saw something he hadn't known he was missing. Someone to fight for, someone to show up for, someone who needed him not for his badge or his rank, but just because he was there. "If you'll have me," he said, voice steady, "then yes, I'd be honored to be your family." Maisie launched herself at him, arms thrown around his neck. Lily Ray followed, slower, but with no less certainty. They clung to him, small arms around his shoulders, heads pressed to his chest. Valor rose, patted over, and gently rested his head across the girl's feet, tail sweeping the floor like a quiet exhale. Marla wiped at her cheeks, unable to hide her smile. That night, Declan didn't rush home. He stayed until the girls fell asleep, curled beside Valor on the floor, a soft blanket over them both. He helped Marla fold laundry. He made tea without asking. And when he left, it wasn't with the sense that he was returning to anything empty. He wasn't going home. He already was. Sometimes family isn't something you're born into. It's something you become through kindness, consistency, and the quiet choice to keep showing up. Declan didn't step into their lives to be a hero. He simply listened, stayed, and let love in. And in doing so, he discovered that healing goes both ways. If this story moved you, leave a comment below. What does family mean to you? We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you believe in stories that restore hope, remind us to care, and celebrate the quiet power of compassion. Don't forget to like this video and follow the channel for more. Your support helps us share more stories that matter.